Welcome to BizTech's Ecosystems Conversation Show. Now, where we feature topics and also feature movers and shakers in the tech ecosystem. Now, today we talk to Dr. Sivapalan Vivakerajah from Scaleup, Malaysia, to discuss his thoughts expressed in a two-part article on Digital News Asia on Malaysia as a unicorn nation. Now, Dr. Siva, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Now, Dr. Siva, you looked at Malaysia from a unicorn nation from really two angles. But before that, kind of give us an idea of what made you write that article.
Okay, so a couple of reasons, right? First of all, our Minister of Science, Khairi Jamaluddin, in one of his presentation talked about why Malaysia doesn't have enough unicorns. And the second reason is because Malaysia just came up with a policy paper called My Digital, where they wanted to create 5 unicorns in Malaysia in the next 10 years. So that kind of prompted me to say, okay, as a policy, we want to create unicorns, but can we actually do so? Okay. That's why I wrote it.
Now, you looked at it from two angles. Now, firstly, from a macro angle, where you looked at the environment and the ecosystem in Malaysia to see whether it's possible. Now, the second thing is obviously you want to, it's about looking at it from a micro angle, the software, the entrepreneurs, to explore whether they really had what it took to build a unicorn. Now, let's talk about first the macro. And you talked about market size and an opportunity. Now, what are the impediments here for the Malaysian entrepreneur?
Okay, thanks, Brian. So in terms of the macro, right? So I'm looking at the ecosystem, the environment that, companies and entrepreneurs are working within, right? So the first one, of course, is Malaysia is a 30 million market. It's a very small market compared to all the large markets around you. But when we look around at all the unicorns out there, none of them have built a unicorn, or very, very few have built unicorns out of small markets. So even Vietnam, right, only has one unicorn, and that's like a 90 million market, right? Philippines has one, that's like a 100 million population market. So even with that size of market, you hardly have any unicorns. The only unicorns in this part of the world are in Indonesia, which is, it's a huge market, right? 280 million market or something like that. When you look at unicorns in Asia, they are from India, they are from China, and you look at America as many unicorns. So wherever you find very large markets with large populations, and they must be kind of homogeneous. So America is a single language, China is a single language, Indonesia is a single language, cultures are the same, then you can build unicorns. So at least that's where unicorns have been built. And although we talk about Southeast Asia as a 650 million population market, it has so many differences: language, regulations, culture. So it's really tough to build a unicorn in a small market or in a market that's very diverse.
Okay, Dr. Siva, I think I beg to differ on that. So there's a distinct difference, for example, between successful Chinese startups and unicorns and Indian unicorns and startups who are successful. The Chinese approach and the Chinese entrepreneurs seem to be very insular and more inward focused on their very large market. The Indian entrepreneur, however, from the get-go, is basically thinking global. And yesterday, we interviewed an Indian company called Hubilo, which basically a year ago had 250 US dollars of revenue, and today has a run rate 1 year later of 10 million US dollar run rate. Now, they've grown tremendously in 1 year, but India is only 12% of their market. So perhaps that is something that shouldn't be, and the Scandinavians, if you look out of Asia, the Scandinavians, your Finland, your Sweden and stuff, they've built a couple of unicorns, but they have tiny markets. So maybe perhaps that shouldn't be an impediment for Malaysian entrepreneurs in terms of growing their business.
Okay, so when you read my article in full, right, both part 1 and part 2, I do talk about companies like Skype, for example, right, that built it out of a really small market but went global, right? So if you look at part 2, and I do say that if you want to build a unicorn, you have to be global from day one, right? That's the micro part of it, right?
Yes.
Entrepreneurs can build if you're global from day one. But generally speaking, a lot of the unicorns are actually within their own market. So if you look at India, the company that you talked about probably not yet a unicorn. They probably have opportunity because they're global. But
That's
if you
right.
look at India, you look at Flipkart, you look at Paytm, they're all Indian companies.
Yeah, the
They are
local
already
market.
unicorns.
Yes.
Local market, Indian companies, local market, and they're already unicorns. So I'm not saying that you can never build a unicorn, right, outside of a small market. You can, provided you have a really global product from day one, and it's a type of product that you can serve a global market. So if you look at Flipkart, for example, e-commerce and all that, it's maybe not so easy to serve a global market, right? But if you look at, if you're doing software, okay, for example, then maybe you can serve a global market. That's one. Secondly, for the Indians in particular, if you look at India and the Indian software companies, they have been global for the last, 30 years or 25
That's
years
right.
now, right? From especially serving European markets and the American market, right? So India has had this opportunity for 25 years, built great global companies, right? Listed their companies on NASDAQ even. And secondly, India has a lot of role models, Indians who have gone to America and built successful companies, come back to India and started new companies and started funding companies. With these global networks, this Indian diaspora with their fantastic networks, right? So they help them to do it. And you've got role models like, the CEOs of Microsoft and Google and all are Indians. So when Indians look at it, they will look at it and say, if they can do it, so can I. Compared to Malaysia, we have no such role models. We don't have this diaspora. We don't have successful Malaysians who build billion-dollar companies outside Malaysia coming back and starting stuff here. So there is a slight difference here.
And also, Siva, then that also then leads us to two other things which are correlated, which is about the diaspora, which we don't have, which is talent and market access.
Mm-hmm.
Could you sort of elaborate on your thoughts on that in terms of some of the impediments to building a unicorn in those areas?
Okay. So I think let me take talent first, right? So everyone always says Malaysia doesn't have sufficient talent. And I choose to disagree with that. In the first place, Malaysia has talent. Every country has talent. Malaysia has talent, but the talent is probably working in multinational companies and government-linked companies, right? Where they earn a lot more money than if they could work for a startup, which is a high-risk kind of enterprise. Then you have a lot of Malaysians working in Singapore, for example. If you look at the Singapore financial services industry, half of them are run by Malaysians.
Yeah.
And so Malaysia has talent, except that, if you don't pay enough money, you're not going to get the talent. Secondly is, this is 2021, it's not like 1980. Today, the world is a small village. You can get talent from anywhere in the world. I mentioned Patrick Grove in my article, right? Patrick Grove hires people from around the region. He hires people from Australia and so on. What is the most important element to do all of these things to get the best talent? Money. If you have the funds, if you raise the funds, you have the money, you can hire the talent. If you look at people like Grab, they get talent from everywhere. The best talent from Asia will join Grab because Grab can pay them. So if you have the funds, you can find the talent. So that's the one point I want to make. The second one is you talked about market access, right? I mean, Malaysia is a small market, but if even within our small market, if Malaysian companies don't buy local products or local software and services, we cannot even make enough money in our local market to use that to expand and build on stuff, right?
And that's about beating the drum, Siva, for the last 20 years, isn't it? About buying local products from Malaysian tech companies.
Yes, Brian, you and I have known each other for more than 20 years, and we've been beating the same drum, right? But I guess the drum has to be beaten until someone gets it into their head. Because if you look at Korea and Japan and China, local companies support local technology. They buy local, right? We are one of the few countries that don't do this. Even in Indonesia, they are starting to buy Indonesian products. Indonesian companies buy Indonesian products. In Malaysia, we still prefer foreign products, So we have to change. That has to change because we have a lot of government-linked companies, public listed companies, and even the government that buys a lot of technology. It's time they bought local so we can support our local economy.
Now, you brought up a very key point, which is funding. There are significant funding challenges, obviously, for the Malaysian entrepreneur. Walk us through some of them.
So I've been championing funding for a long time as well, right? In terms of policy papers and so on. So if you look at funding in Malaysia over the last 20 years, it's primarily the government that's been providing the funding. And they've been providing venture capital funding, but they did it wrong. They didn't do it the right way. They look for people who are in corporate finance and say, hey, you're a corporate finance guy, come and do venture capital, right?
Yeah.
The learning curve is long. These people don't have the networks, so there were a lot of failures. You look at how Singapore did it. Singapore didn't say, hey, corporate finance guy, come and set up a venture fund, right? Singapore said, here is the money. I want people from all the successful VC funds from around the world, come to Singapore, set up your funds here, and I will back you up. So Singapore provided the fund. So this is what I did in my task force report 2 years ago, right? I said, if you want to do this right, this is the way to do it. And I'm glad currently Penjana Capital, the government agency that's been tasked with funding venture capital, is doing it the right way, right? So they're doing it on a fund of funds model. They are providing matching funds and inviting VCs from around the world to come and set up in Malaysia and bring your matching funds, and we'll match it one-to-one. And that's starting to work out. There are a lot of people that were interested in this thing,
And Siva, did we manage to attract any big name VCs as part of this initiative?
I think there were quite a few VCs that came, right? I think we had VCs from Korea. We had people like Kookmin Bank, for example. They had an agent. They're among the top largest banks in Korea. They have a VC fund. They came. We had a Hive from the US that came. So we actually attracted investors from the whole region. And one of the requirement was each of them must show success before they will do this matching. So if you don't have a track record, then the government will not accept you into this. So they've done this. They've made sure everybody had a track record, and now we've got 10 different. Was it 10? Eight different funds, right? That have set up both for venture capital as well as venture debt. So I think that's the right way to do it. We attracted quite a lot of companies, and I think that's the right way to do it. Because now we have networks that go right out to Korea and China and US and Europe and Singapore. So that's really great, right? I think that's the right way to do it. And the second thing is, I think now finally, thanks to this matching, there's 1.57 billion ringgit worth of funds that's going to be available in our ecosystem. For the longest time, there was no such amount of money. It's always a few million here, a few million there. So, there was just not enough money for Malaysian companies. Now with 1.57 billion, hopefully that's a good start. I've also told the government, in my engagement with them, this is only the beginning. Every year, you must provide more and more funding to the venture capital industry. Then we can grow the ecosystem.
So the other thing that you also talked about was backing them all away. And you and your co-founder, Renuka Sena, wrote a policy paper a decade ago for Agency Inovasi Malaysia, proposing this, but it was never really adopted. Could you share with us what was that policy paper about, and how will that impact the ecosystem today?
So Renu and I wrote that paper 10 years ago, right? 2011 to be exact. That was when Agency Inovasi Malaysia was first started up. So this is Malaysia's innovation agency, right? To promote innovation and build the ecosystem, the technology ecosystem, to move Malaysia up the technology ladder, right? So we wrote a paper, and they asked us to write this paper, right? So we wrote this paper, right? Where we suggested many different policies to them to improve the ecosystem for the country, everything from funding to talent to everything else. But one of the recommendations we made was for them to actually back the best companies in Malaysia all the way. So this is things like, like what China has done with Huawei and Haier and all of these companies, right? So what they did was they picked the best people, they picked the best companies with the best potential, and China, the government backed them all the way, from buying their technology to providing them with the talent, helping them to work with R&D in research institutes and universities, and providing them as much funding as they needed to become global players. And look at where they are today. They are among the largest global players. So that's the same. So, it's not rocket science. You don't have to come up with new ideas. All you have to look at what has worked before in other countries and adopt those things. So the back them all the way strategy is basically adopting the China, Huawei, Haier kind of strategy, right? You pick the best company, but this must be done, properly, right? It must be done based on, there must be genuine thing. They must be properly selected. It must be based on meritocracy, right? So what we said was find 5 to 10 of the best Malaysian companies with the greatest potential, back them all the way, make sure government and private sector and GLCs buy their products, provide them with funding, provide them with talent, and help them to go global. We have a lot of global agencies. Matrade is an agency, Malaysian agent, government agency that helps companies go abroad and go global. MDEC is there to do the same. Can you imagine if we select 5 to 10 of the best Malaysian companies and everybody gets together to back them all the way? I am very sure we will build unicorns. But this is something I've been saying for 10 years and we have not done it yet. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but I'm not one who gives up. So I'm going to keep saying this.
Now, the other flip side of the equation, which is essentially some would argue the most important component, is really the micro element of the entrepreneur. Now, you identified 5 different things that really would help, or is the genetic DNA of an entrepreneur that's going to build a unicorn. Can you share with us, what your experience has taught you in terms of these 5 elements?
Okay. So, Renu and I, we run a program called the Coach and Grow program. We've been doing this for 10 years, right? We've been coaching companies. And I think by now we're a coach about almost 600 companies. But we have also coached companies other than the Coach and Grow program. We have done work for MDEC. We have done work for Cradle Fund. We have done work for MIDA. We've done a lot of it. So we've actually worked with at least about 700, 800 companies already, right? Actually working with them, training them, coaching them. So we have seen a lot of successes. We've seen a lot of failures. We've worked with many different types of entrepreneurs. So I picked out some of the traits of entrepreneurs and the traits of companies, and looked at, if you want to build successful companies, ecosystem alone is not good enough. The companies and entrepreneurs themselves must be really good entrepreneurs. So some of the missing elements were things like, having a vision of what you really want to achieve and being able to articulate this vision, We don't have enough entrepreneurs that have this big vision that want to really go out there and conquer the world, right? We need entrepreneurs who build products that are global from day one. Because, Malaysia is a 30 million market. You can never build it in Malaysia. You can never build great companies in Malaysia, right? If you look at a lot of listed companies out there, and I might get into trouble for this, but a lot of listed companies out there are government-dependent companies. Government gives them contract, gives them concession, then they get listed and they say, oh, we're worth a lot of money, right? But once you take away that, they're all finished. We saw that, right, when there were changes in government. So, if you want to build this kind of product, you must have the right mentality. You must have the right kind of thinking. You must build global products. And I have actually seen companies that have potential to build global products, but they don't. They build it for the local market. And then they say, okay, now I want to go to Indonesia. I try and tweak it for Indonesia. I want to go to Thailand. I try and tweak it for Thailand. It's just impossible to build a company like this, Why don't you look at a product, especially, now you have software as a service and things like that. Mm-hmm. These kinds of products, you can build something like what Zero did out of New Zealand.
Exactly. Right? Small population.
Exactly. 5 million population. But look at the company, right? Atlassian from Australia, right? They built global products for the global market and they went global straight away because they knew their markets were too small. We know our market is too small, but yet our entrepreneurs don't build global products. So I'm already talking to some companies, some of my own investee companies are looking at building this kind of global products, right? And one of my companies is actually doing quite well. It's easy unit. They build a product called Fairways, right? Which is actually looking at for universities and exhibitions, it's virtual exhibitions and virtual open day software, right? We just started this about in 6 to 9 months, we started it. Also because of COVID, right? Because universities couldn't conduct in-person kind of events, so they wanted to go virtual. So we built it for them. And now we have clients from, South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. We've got clients from the US. We're talking to clients in the Middle East, even the Middle East governments from Qatar and from Saudi Arabia are buying our products. So, but when we built it, we knew that it cannot be for local market. So we built a global product. And it's now showing traction. So we can do this. Malaysian entrepreneurs have the talent and we can build this. You just need to change your mindset to think global from day one.
And you talked about, so, and you encompass things like vision and ambition. I think you talked about scaling the business and being born global and really thinking about global.
Mhm.
The other thing you also talk about is building a great team.
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of times, right, we see we don't lack technology products, right? Malaysians can build products. Okay, we mean maybe they're not building global products, but they can build products. And if they put their minds to it, they can build global products. So some of the entrepreneurs in Scaleup Malaysia that I have been coaching have had this light bulb moment when I told them, look, your product is a global product. Why are you making it for the local market? Let's go global. They've had this light bulb moment already, and now they're starting to look at it from a global angle, right? So you can kind of do this, right? So I think it's primarily looking at what do you want to do, how do you do this, and do you have the talent? Now, if you don't have the talent, go and raise money to hire this talent. And you really have to hire the best talent. Because from what I have seen in the 700 odd companies that I have worked with, right? I would say, maybe, a handful, 5% of them have the right talent. 95% don't have this right talent.
That's
Now,
an interesting stat.
some of them want to actually hire this talent, but they don't have the money to hire this talent. So one of our Scaleup Malaysia's investing companies, right? He wanted to hire a really good guy who came from Singapore, but his salary that he earned in Singapore was pretty high. I gave some examples. So when I did a search on JobStreet in Singapore, true enough, those are the kind of salaries that you got to pay. You want to get a country manager, you got to pay 10,000 Singapore dollars. That's 30,000 ringgit in Malaysia.
Minimum, yeah.
Which company in Malaysia can afford this? You cannot unless you have funding, right?
Yep.
So if you want the talent, it will take money to hire the talent. The talent is there. But again, you cannot build a global business, you cannot build a unicorn without good talent. To hire talent, you do need this money, unfortunately.
And also the entrepreneur and the talents in the company need to hustle on performance, right?
Absolutely. Yes, that's why Karamji actually titled it Hustle. I didn't say hustle, but
Yeah.
Karamji titled it Hustle, right? Because a couple of things I see that entrepreneurs don't do enough, right? One is Malaysian entrepreneurs aren't enough performance driven, right? Performance driven means you set your metrics, you set your KPIs, and you got to push your team to go out there and get these KPIs, right? If you say, okay, I'm going to close 10 deals a month, you know what Malaysian companies do? Oh, we close two. Okay, never mind. Next month we close 10. And then next month we did two. Okay, never mind. Next month we do 10. This is not performance driven, right? You need to be more performance driven. If we're going to do 10, and if you do two, you sack the guys and hire somebody else who can do the 10, right?
Or make sure in the second month that you do 8 plus 10.
Exactly, right? But you have to be performance driven. A lot of them don't even set KPIs. Why don't they set KPIs? Because they know they were never going to achieve the KPIs, so better don't set KPIs. Or they set very loose KPIs. So you really have to be performance driven, right? And second thing is entrepreneurs and founders got to hustle. You got to do things fast. You got to do things quickly. Because in the technology world, things change very quickly, right? In 6 months, in 12 months, entire industries can change. So if you're not
We've seen
moving
that.
fast, yeah, if you're not moving fast, if you're not moving quickly, one, technology may change. Secondly, someone who is better funded than you might come into your market and eat your lunch. You will lose your market. But still, we have entrepreneurs who are slow-mo, do things slowly, don't do things fast enough. That's why I said, you got to hustle, man. You got to hustle. You got to go and sell like crazy. You got to find the right people to push, be performance-driven. They must also hustle. That's the only way to do it. And founders need to hustle even to raise money. Some founders, they say, okay, I pitched to 3 people and they haven't come back to me and, I'll wait another 6 months. No, man. You want to do this, you got to hustle. You got to pitch to 50, 60, 70 investors. You got to keep doing this every day if you need to until you raise the money. That's hustle. How many entrepreneurs in Malaysia do that? Probably not even 2%, right? So this is a problem. Malaysian entrepreneurs, and not just Malaysian, I think a lot of Asian entrepreneurs, right? I shouldn't generalize it. I think a lot of Asian entrepreneurs really need to hustle. The thing is, the Indian entrepreneurs are these kind of hustlers, right? Indian entrepreneurs, I worked with them before in the previous life as well. They are really into this thing, right? They work really hard, they hustle, they push, they do all of these things. So they build great companies, right? Malaysians need to do the same. If you don't do this, we're going to be left behind. So, there's quite a lot of things that entrepreneurs need to be like. You need to have a change of mindset. You need to think global. You need to have bigger ambitions. Malaysians don't have enough ambition. You build a small company in Malaysia, okay lah, maybe somebody buy me or I get listed on Bursa Malaysia and worth $30 million. Yeah? That's not ambition. You've got to be really ambitious. You've got to build great companies. Where's that big, hairy, audacious goal? So that's the kind of stuff we need if we're going to create unicorns. And that's the missing thing. We don't have enough of that.
Now, on that inspiring note, Dr. Siva, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you, Brian. You can see I'm hustling here, okay? I'm 60 over years old and I'm hustling, man. So what's wrong with all this? What's wrong with all the young entrepreneurs? They should be hustling more than me. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks a lot, Siva. I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Scaleup Malaysia's founder and partner, Dr. Sivapalan Vivakerajah, on BizTech Ecosystems Conversations. Check out www.biztech.asia for business and technology conversations.